To start the committee hearing. And so we're not going to require a quorum. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee hearing. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood. I represent Legislative District 2. I serve as chair of this committee. We'll start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Lauren Lippincott, and Legislative District number 34.
Robert Dover, District 19.
Myron Norton, District 30.
Assisting the committee today is Tamara Hunt, our committee clerk, and to my left is our fiscal analyst, John Weimer. And our page today is Kate and Malcolm. At the entrance, you'll find green testifier sheets on the table. If you're planning to testify today, please fill out a green testifier sheet. Hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you'll not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at the entrance where you may leave your name and related information. Excuse me. There's so few people here. It makes it hard to read this with a straight face. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones. The order of testimony will be introducer, proponents, opponents, neutral, and closing. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. Also, there's normally a deadline for submitting position comments. Due to the inclement weather and the snowstorm, an extension of the online position comments has been made for today. Additional position comments may be added to the public hearing record if received by 5 p.m. Central Time today. With that, we'll begin today's hearing with Agency 36, Nebraska Racing and Gaming Commission. Is there a representative? Seeing none, we do have a position comment for Agency 36. We have one proponent. And that will conclude Agency 36. And next will be Agency 56, Nebraska Wheat Board. Is there any representative from the Nebraska Wheat Board? Seeing none, we do have a position comment, a neutral comment regarding the Wheat Board. Thank you. And seeing no other testifiers, that concludes Agency 56. Next is Agency 60, the Nebraska Ethanol Board. We'll open the hearing for Agency 60. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I made it. And I promise I'll be brief. My name is Reid Wagner, REIDWAGNER. I'm actually the executive director of the Nebraska Ethanol Board. Just here really to kind of provide a little bit of my background as well as the agency background and kind of where we're headed. The ethanol industry is going through a lot of change, and that's kind of reflected in the appropriation request that we've submitted for the next biennium budget. So my background is a little different than our previous administrators in that I'm actually a chemical engineer by training. I've worked in the private industry in fuels, both sides, made ethanol, made gasoline, blended them together. I've also done specialty chemicals. So a little bit of process engineering, project engineering, those kinds of things. A little more of a technical flair has come to the board as it's kind of reminiscent of me sitting in this chair today. And with that comes a lot more research and development activities to try to help our producers steward or be stewarded into new value-added markets. So something beyond, of course, the gas tank, talking about renewable chemicals, moving towards sustainable aviation fuels, talking about how does ethanol fill up a jet engine's gas tank, those kinds of things. Those are really difficult questions that our ethanol industry is taking a hard look at. And of course, we have 24 plants across the state with the capability of making 2.6 billion gallons. There's a lot of value that can be brought in finding these new markets. So that kind of necessitates a little extra research and development, some direct contact with market development activities. And that's why we've kind of set our initial request for the appropriation amounts for the next biennium budget. And I would just like to extend a thank you to the Appropriations Committee, to the Legislature for recognizing the requests that we've made and helping us continue our mission to bolster that value that we bring to our growers across the state through value-added products like ethanol production. So I'm just happy to answer any questions that you guys might have about the agency, the ethanol industry. And if there's none, then I can go wade back through the snow back home.
Are there any questions from the committee? I know that we have a committee member who was an airline pilot. And what do you think about putting ethanol in the airplane?
We transform it into a kerosene derivative, so it's a little more reminiscent of the typical aviation fuels that you'd see with no lead in them. But
Is that still a pilot project, or are you supplying aircraft now?
so it's in the works. There's development projects announced all over the place. Some of the bigger projects have been over in Illinois at the moment, and they'll send a lot of their aviation fuel they make to O'Hare and some of the larger airport, and municipalities over there too. So we're hoping to see a lot of that come over to Nebraska. ADM has jumped into a possible agreement with GEVO as well to provide those kinds of products from Nebraska. And if we're able to do it, we're the westernmost major ethanol producer. So we might be able to sell that aviation fuel from Nebraska on out west as well. So we'd keep enough for home, but we'd give some to others as needed too.
Senator Lippincott?
Yes, sir. How about the status with diesel fuel?
Good question. So with diesel fuel, there have been a really interesting, there's two kinds of ways that you can do it. You can modify the diesel engine to run on higher blends of ethanol or blends of diesel and ethanol, which is happening. There's a company called Clear Flame Technologies who's trying to alter a diesel engine to run on E98, a 98% ethanol blend, straight from the plant. So trucks can fill up with that. On the other side, similar chemistry is taking place where you're trying to take ethanol and make a diesel fuel out of that. So really, you're just trying to find different biomass or plant-based sources for these kinds of fuels, as opposed to the typical petroleum and fossil-based sources, which of course is always a benefit for us in Nebraska with so many good field crops to utilize.
How is this research funded? Does the ethanol industry or your ethanol board do that?
Yeah, so the ethanol board, whenever we take part in these research activities, it's funded through our checkoff tax effectively on every gallon of denaturant that an ethanol plant buys. They want to make sure that there's what's called a denaturant in there, so we don't go to the plants and try to drink it. So when they buy that gasoline to put in there in about 2%, about a 1.25 cent per gallon tax is given to us as the agency to do market development, research and development, those kinds of activities. So we invest in these research avenues, and we do it quite consistently through the university here in Lincoln. Most recently, we did our E30 demonstration, or at least started it, and we'll be doing that for the next couple of years, putting 30% ethanol blends across our state fleet. So,
Very good. Senator Dorn?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here, but you said the 1.2 cents a gallon, is that the 2% going in there, or is that the other 98%?
that's 3% going in. We tax that denaturant. So they typically use what's called natural gasoline to denature fuel ethanol so that we can put it in our gas tank in the same way that we would any other fuel. And so we take the 1.25 cents per gallon of that.
So in other words, though, I call it the whole industry-wide, that 2.6 billion gallons that you're producing in the state of Nebraska, the tax then is based on that additional 2% that's where that supports your,
Yep, exactly. Our typical budget is around $600,000 to $700,000 per year. Just kind of tracks with the fuel market. It can be a little volatile. You know, people stop driving for different reasons or pick it up in the summer when they're out there trying to do vacations, things like that. So we'll kind of see that trend, but it's usually around $600,000, $700,000.
so you don't use your budget that much to, I call it, promote the product, and as you do for basically the operation of you and your department.
Yeah, we do use quite a bit of it to just operate. Of course, we're a four-member staff. We have a lot of capabilities in-house to do those marketing activities. We provide informational materials to many other state agencies like Environment and Energy, Economic Development, you guys, if you have questions. Those are kind of where a big portion of that goes. And then the other side are projects like research and development projects, and those investments to try to, you know, inform regulators or push the ethanol industry into new market spaces.
Senator Dover.
I don't really understand what you're talking about, adding this and denatured.
Yeah, so when you produce ethanol, you have to ensure through basically liquor and beverage laws in the United States that when you produce ethanol, we don't want people going there and just trying to drink grain alcohol. They need to put something in there so that humans cannot consume it. And so that is what we refer to as denaturant. And when you use ethanol as a fuel, you can use a gasoline to denature that, to make sure that nobody's ingesting the ethanol before it makes it into your vehicle. So they put in 2% of gasoline. So that's why I say E98. It's a blend of 98% ethanol and then 2% gasoline, which is the denaturant. And so we take the tax on that 2%.
So they're basically poisoning what you can drink.
They're not poisoning
Grain
it.
alcohol.
Yeah, they're just making sure that nobody is ingesting the product.
What would you compare as far as the percentage of grain alcohol? Like if it was drinkable, what would it be rated at?
It would be at 200 proof, so it would be the full. You'd call that maybe E100 if you really wanted to. There would be
Same stuff they make in Kentucky.
I think my grandpa used to make in the cornfield back in the 30s.
Yep. So hopefully that was a little clarity. It can get a little
I know,
technical, but yeah.
Filled in there.
Are there any other questions? Senator Lippincott?
Again, there's about a dozen or so, I'll call ethanol plants here in Nebraska, correct? One of them's in my hometown of Central City. So approximately that. So they're just simply making ethanol in those plants, correct? And then it's shipped out someplace else and then put into the proper mixture. So my question is, again, back on the diesel fuel aspect of it, are we doing that here in Nebraska, making diesel fuel out of ethanol? And where are the other places where they make the mixture?
Yeah, good question. So the first thing I'll say as well is that really good facilities like the one in Central City, which would be Green Plains over there, they actually produce more than just ethanol. They produce value-added co-products in the form of distillers corn oil, as well as distillers dried grains. And so basically the whole concept is you make ethanol out of the starch of the corn, but that's not the whole corn kernel. There's still a feed product in there. And so that gets fed to livestock across the state, and corn oil can actually be used to make diesel too, in a different kind of process. And so the diesel production that's coming in Nebraska more prevalently at the moment is using crush plants. They basically crush soybeans and they get that different kind of vegetable oils, those sorts of things, and they convert those to diesel fuels. So there's been a little bit more, but you can't use those necessarily all the time for aviation fuels. So that's why ethanol has been looking more at the aviation industry as kind of a market opportunity and a place, like really a volume that we can fill, as opposed to diesel first. And the mixes have kind of died down over the years. It's possible to do it, but it is a lot easier for the supply chain to just run normal renewable diesel, regular diesel, those kinds of things. The really exciting things for me are the engine modifications done to run E98. And those actually, it's Clear Flame Technologies I mentioned. They're actually, I think they're going to begin a pilot program with Warner Trucking Enterprises here pretty soon. So stay tuned on some of that stuff. But
Yeah, so we're not turning ethanol into diesel, we're changing the truck engine into an ethanol burning engine.
Mhm.
All right. Are there any other questions? Senator Dilber?
So, years ago, California was having a problem with adding ethanol. They wanted to add some other additive to gasoline.
Mhm.
We briefly just describe is that still going on at all, or?
It's not, and our board was actually very, very involved in some of those discussions. I'll kind of take it back that the first additive to yellow button is true, that you press that 17 or 8 you want. Lead refiners were putting lead in the gasoline, so we all kind of knew about leaded fuels. Some of them are still around for some of those antique cars, those kinds of things. When people decided putting lead in fuel was not such a great idea, they looked for alternatives, and the refiners offered a chemical called MTBE, which is another additive, which is the one you were discussing. That was pretty popular in California until it began to leak into our groundwater system in various areas, and then it was effectively banned across the country. And so people were looking for the alternative, and that's really where 10% ethanol was born as a major, basically fuel additive to make sure that you're pressing that yellow button, you're getting the right octane of fuel that you need. So in the search for something that we could produce domestically, that wasn't going to poison our groundwater supply, that was lower emissions and not lead, of course, that's where we got with 10% ethanol. And now at least 98% of ethanol across the country has at least 10% ethanol in it. So that's kind of a little bit of, I think you're talking about MTBE.
Right, it was, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and that one's banned now.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else here wanting to testify on Agency 60 Ethanol Board? Do we have any letters? We have a position comment, one proponent.
That was me.
Oh,
In case I didn't make it today.
oh, yes, thank
I
you.
barely chugged along and got here.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Senator Clemens, I do have a question. You said on the first two that nobody was here, that there was a position statement. Was that their board making a statement or just other people or?
Let me check with the clerk here.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, you'll be giving those to us as an email or something or what, or if they're not here, I guess just as we go through their agency later, just so we have something to, they were fine or not. I mean, that's just a thought. I don't know. You know how to handle those going out and stuff.
Well, we'll get information to the committee, yeah, when we don't have testifiers here.
Yeah, well, if they're just saying that they're okay with what we did, then that's fine, but if they had some, or if we had some question and then they're answering it, that's, I guess, more what I'd be interested in.
All right.
Yeah. So you can pick and choose, I'm fine with that, I don't need all or whatever, but I mean, if they're telling us for
Yes.
some reason
If
that,
there's, if there is a specific comment about
Yes.
their budget, we'll forward that on.
yeah,
Now, the next agency is Agency 61, Dairy Industry Development Board. Is there a representative? There is no representative. Anyone here wanting to testify? Seeing none, do we have any comments? We have no comments from them, and anyone, if they want to submit a comment, they have till 5 o'clock Central Time that they could do that. Otherwise, we'll move on. That'll conclude Agency 61, and we'll open the hearing for Agency 86, Nebraska Dry Bean Board. Is there a representative here?
we need Senator Erdman.
Seeing none, is anyone wanting to testify on the Dry Bean Board? Seeing none, do we have any comments? Again, no comments have been submitted. They can be submitted by 5 p.m. today. And that concludes Agency 86. Next is Agency 88, the Nebraska Corn Board. Is there a representative from the Corn Board? Seeing none, are there any testifiers? Seeing none, I do have a position comment. a representative of the Nebraska Corn Board as a proponent for the agency. And that will conclude Agency 88. Next, we'll go with Agency 92, the Nebraska Grain Sorghum Board. And we see no representative here or any testifiers. Do we have any comments from the Grain Sorghum Board? All right, that will conclude Agency 92. Next is Agency 95, the Dry Pea and Lentil Commission. Seeing no representative here in person, no testifiers. I do have a position comment from a person representing themselves as a neutral, in the neutral position. That concludes Agency 95. Agency 89, the Hemp Commission. We'll open the hearing for Agency 89. See no one here to testify. Do we have any position comments? Seeing none, that concludes Agency 89, and that concludes the Appropriations Committee hearing today.
That was
25
quick.
minutes?
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
You got 24
Yeah.
minutes.
I don't remember who it was, but this morning over the